Okay, this is Calicat the Calicatster, and this is the penultimate episode of Starfleet Academy, 300th night. Yeah, you're in studio. It looks like a dorm. That's the joke, but it's also yeah. We're going to be actually moving up north, so this is the last. The next week will be the last video of that. It's Mark's Cards, John Knight. We'll have a retrospective on the Calcat show, the studio, everything that we've been in all my life, and stuff like that. So the KTS studio, that kind of thing. But this is and where we filmed Starship Locations and all Transformers Mush and all that. And this is the room where Transformers was done. It's the grandfather of Transformers fan films, which I was making even as a kid when the show was on the air. No one else on record was ever doing that in the 80s during the show with their film camcorder. Later on, yes, when it became a thing. But here, and Star Trek ones as well. So Starfleet Academy, the 300th night, allegedly the final school year of the season. We take off with that story, and because the other stuff is minutia from Silly Trek, and we don't need to go into all that. Penultimate episode, this is episode 9, which means the episode before the finale. Likes and dislikes and all that stuff. Sam returns, and she has a double life like she's schizo. But she's not acting that way. Kind of. There's Caleb and Sam basically figure out what the code for accessing the mother's messages is. The tech in this story matches with modern day. And you might think that's a little goofy because it's supposed to be 900 years later. But in order to visually show a medium, you kind of have to do that. And also, Star Trek, since the beginning, has been not only woke and inclusive, it's also been a reflection of the time period. The 60s Star Trek was very sort of just after the 50s sci-fi monster and sci-fi boom thing kind of thing. A lot of the classic Trek episodes are, in fact, horror episodes. And half of them are fantasy episodes. So science fiction, as it was coined later in the 50s. I believe Isaac Asimov did science fiction. But then in the 80s, they coined a space opera, which is also what the movies were more like space opera. Star Trek, 60 years of Star Trek coming up this year. But yes, in the new studio, there will be more starship locations of some kind. There will be more up there, and when we get the new place, eventually, hopefully long before next September and the actual anniversary of the show. I don't think the toy show that's on the weekend. I don't think I'm doing that. I don't think I'm doing the other thing. I don't think we're doing Fanime unless something else happens because we'll be up north. So here's back to the Star Trek 60th anniversary. Next Generation was a product of its time. Technology and devices were similar and relatable to the 80s, the 1980s when that show, and in the 90s with Deep Space Nine and Voyager, and the early 2000s with Enterprise. The technology seemed to advance tremendously, though because the 60s didn't. So it's conceivable a show done in 2026 is going to have ridiculous text messaging. They're still using that, even though that would be an archaic form at that point. Now they did mention the burn a bunch of times. They went back, but still, technology wouldn't. But anyway, it doesn't. It's a minutia thing. It's like Trek fans, Trekkies, Trekkers are not as obsessed over the minutia of the canon in that way than the Star Wars ones. The Star Wars ones, no, the characters have to act a certain way, and But in Star Trek, it's more like, well, yeah, we like the technology. So there's a certain amount of the geek and nerd speak in there. A certain amount of it's more science than science fantasy. if a Star Wars met a Star Trek, it'd be like, oh, they have space wizards that have Jedi laser swords and stuff, and an empire. One thing noted in this episode was that you can't really and it doesn't make sense in Star Wars really either. If you actually want to take over a planet, a solar system, mind you, and then control other solar systems, mind you, you would have to have billions of ships with 100 billion people on them. In order to do that, you'd have to have so many people controlling everything. Otherwise, they'd just get through. There's the trouble with science fiction and science fantasy is it's like you don't have instantaneous anything out. The speed of light hinders that. But in Star Trek, apparently they have instant communications over light years, using subspace and subspace radio and hyper radio. I called it hyper radio in my books. It just made a little sense. But hyperspace, warp, and travel. Hyperspace isn't exactly warp drive, but it's kind of similar. It seems to be faster in some ways, but slower in others. The Kessel Run, for instance, which is a parsec is a few light years, and it's not a measure of time. So, yeah, it's a measure of distance. Anyway, space and time. But yeah, in Star Trek, they seem to fudge warp drive quite a lot, if the plot allows. So they're like, oh yeah, Deep Space Nine was notorious for that. Supposed to be on the edge of Federation space, but in some episodes, the Defiance instantly insults system. Like, okay, so this show was not unreasonable 900 years after the other stuff to, in the 3195, is when the story, and 96 is when the story takes place, to have instant warp drive as well, to have like, what amounts to transwarp, basically, that's what they should call it. They had a transwarp hub in it. Caleb steals, back to the story, they figure out what the password is, and it's really stupid. Yeah, it's dumb. It's like he hadn't figured that out, that it's his name and an anagram. No, that's okay, that's really dumb. And the bad guy didn't figure that out, because you just can't make it his name. That's the first freaking thing. If you write a password, and like, even now, they have passwords and usernames, and the kids use that, and it's like, you use your name, you're gonna get hacked. I kept thinking, okay, that they're gonna kill the mother, because it's gonna be funny. Or they're just gonna be ironic and mean and just kill the mother. But they didn't, thankfully. Well, there's still another episode left. They hired the actress on for like 3 of the episodes, so she's in 3 of them. She's in the finale too. So she's not dead. But we knew that going in. We knew a lot of things going in. And everything's playing out pretty much the way, we knew a little bit going in. We didn't have access to ready scripts or anything. It was just more like rumors and speculation. Let's say that. Leave it at that. Meanwhile, Netflix, Paramount trying to overbid on Warner Brothers over there, doing a bunch of crazy stuff. Skydance is already Paramount, and that's something else. It doesn't affect us directly. We're independent of that and the other channels that we've been associated with over the years. We're not associated with them, which is why we can't do backgrounds and can't do actual, take assets from the show, because we're not in the show. If we were shills for the show, we would have access to that. So yeah, they mention the Omega particle, and they put 47 in there. It has 47s on everything, and because of course it is. 47 ships were in the other story in the battle of the Legacy episodes same thing there. The number 47, I know where that comes from. It was a next gen kit, next gen cadet, and all that. Tommy Newson, who writes for this story, could not have known Will Wheaton and them and Nick Locarno, as I said many times before, or our class of the Academy, because she would have been 10 years younger than us at the Academy. That wouldn't have made sense. And at the Battle of Wolf 359, she would have been, about that same age, roughly, a little younger. 10, maybe 8. Yeah, she wouldn't have been there. So by the 2380s, anyways. So, but there's a little bit of that in there because there's a cameo with a Demonati Rawl bad guy at the end, or at least it looks like her. It's probably not, but it could be a cameo. So I don't know if it is, but that'd be funny. There's the programmable matter thing. There's the guys basically get the cadets, with the exception of the Klingon and the Beta Z girl. They have this moment of the Beta Z girl before he leaves, about her name being like music. Not Beta Z girl, before Darren leaves, or the guy Caleb. Not Caleb. I probably was saying Darren. Darren's the other guy. Caleb, and Mir. Caleb Mir. His last name is Russian for peace, but neither of them look Russian. Are they Romanis? What are they? Anyway, that'd be cool. But yeah, they're there. So we have the hottie guy and some of the crew go to this alien planet. It doesn't appear to be a Cillian planet, but it appears to have Metalis-like surface, free cloud-like surface that is outside of Federation space. And the bad guys are going to control it, and they have these 47 mines. Anyway, I was going to say where 47 came from. Okay, Michael Piller and Brendan Braga and Ron Moore, I think it was Ron Moore and Piller, had a joke going on, like all their number 47 appears in everything. And what that actually is not Berman's Letterman number. It is his dormitory apartment number, the dormitory apartment number of Brandon Braga, actually, I believe. I think that's what it is. His dormitory apartment number was 47 in college. That's all it is. Well, isn't any weirder than Roddenberry going, my friend Mr. Klingon, who was my buddy in movies and stuff, and it was a cop, a security cop guy, Mr. Klingon, I'm going to name an alien race after you. And he's like, okay, the Klingons. That's where that came from. That's cool, but mainly for Three Ninjas. So anyway, that's not here or there. So the story, they go to this weird planet that's like Free Cloud, where the Kevani Rawl are the bad guys. Kevani Rawl does sound like somebody from the original Star Trek. It's a TNG group, right? Yeah, the Rawl. Yeah, sounds Indian. But yeah, they're it's clearly kind of a trap. They're going to annex the planet immediately. That's another thing with annexing planets immediately and having space things and stuff. Like I was saying, you can't just take over like all of space. It doesn't work that way. I know it's silly and some of the people argue with that other thing, but you can't do that. You have even when the Starship Enterprise D would come to a planet, it was kind of weird that they would meet the people who were in charge. Why would they meet the people who were in charge? And why would they be in charge? What hold did they have over the planet? I mean, not realize for science fiction purposes, a dozen people beam down, they have to meet a dozen people because they can't just do an entire army or something. And then they do alien stories where aliens come to Earth and they meet the government and the military and all that stuff, and then the battle happens. So yeah, that would happen there too. They would like, oh, what is this Federation ship here going? The UN of their planet wouldn't meet with Picard necessarily, would they? But yeah, for science fiction purposes, you don't want a long drawn out trade negotiation because that's boring. They put that in one of the Star Wars prequels. Don't do that. We don't want to see that. That's yeah. So obviously they have to do that to forward the story. Yes, but it is cliched. so they got these mines that they set up that they've decided to make artificial omega particle mines and do the Deep Space Nine mining the wormhole thing and do the super weapon that's going to destroy the galaxy because they just can't resist. With every season of Discovery, of which this is a spin-off, at some point there's a universe-defying weapon that's going to go off, trap them on the other side of the space thingy that they apparently have to solve in one episode because they can't end the series with that. So maybe they're going to do the Mark's Cards thing, and the gag will be that the space mine, which was our original ending of Section 31, in which that had a super weapon in it too, and the joke was going to be the super weapon. Oh, are you kidding? It wasn't real. Yeah, it wasn't going to blow up the Federation. That's stupid. No, it was just a toy. I was just playing you guys. It was like, come on, I'm not going to blow up the universe with me in it. That's dumb. So, yeah. And then the Carta show made fun of that as well. It said, oh, the super weapon was going to activate, but the cat guy broke it. I thought it was a tiny cat toy, and I shredded it. Sorry. No! He's just the Darth Vader. No! From the prequels. But yes, in that series. But back in the Star Trek story, yeah, the Academy cadets are on this free cloud type of planet. They do the Borg cube ending from Picard season 3, fly over and beam them up to safety, and they rescued the mother, but she's been wounded. They figure out that they're Starfleet. The bad guys are going to go in a firefight. Of course, in science fiction movies, the laser blasts never actually really hurt anybody, or if they do, they're bad shots or something, like in Star Wars as well. There's a blooper in the Star Wars OG stuff where the guy bonks his head. So yeah. So the premise of this story is there's like a double cross going on. Nustifer, who is also Nustifer, he's stolen the name from our show, so we turned around and stole the name back in the Legacy finale. For the main bad guy that's controlling Cottle in our universe in 2408, I guess? Yeah, 2408. He's Nustifer as well, a different Nustifer. His ancestor, perhaps, who is a Q-like being who is controlling Cottle. He's his father. Yeah. It's probably those hologram people from the other story. No, it's a Q-like thing. It's a Cillian overlord. That makes a little more sense. And the Cillian, the Koinonian, they make it a point to put an H in there this time because they saw our fan films I'm complaining about. They also mentioned the bonding, which was that episode with Jeremy Astor in this episode. They do a version of the bonding. So they're really aware of that next generation character, and it's supposed to be them, the Koinonians without an H. That is supposed to be what they are. Just over the years, they evolved to have an H in their name. So they are, in fact, the church people as well. On Sunday Night Alternative College Koinonia, which was part of the role-playing thing, as well as the church group, and was the spaceship. There's the Exodus, and a bunch of other ones. Fellowship, a bunch of ships, yeah. And in our cadets, and in that episode, in that story in the 90s, the church group cadets, one of them is which is still around, Scott's still around. Yeah, he throws a basketball into the warp core and almost blows up the ship. I don't know how it got in the warp core, but it did. But yes, the safeties that beam this. The safety protocol beamed the extra piece of matter out of the helium in the ball out into, well, not helium, but the air of the ball, oxygen, the ball out into space. Yeah, crazy cadet guys back in the day, and so we have on the Exodus. I believe that was the Exodus. So there's a bunch of other ships. So the Academy ship has to escape. Part of it gets separated and captured. The other half gets away, and then they're on the other side of the thing. They activate all these alleged mines that cover an entire sector of the Alpha and Beta Quadrant. That's impossible. Even in the distant future, that is impossible. That is stupid. So obviously the only way out of this scenario in the final episode next Thursday is that it doesn't really do what they think it does. And that is a trick. And they're not really. How could they clone them so fast? The mines too. That doesn't make. And it would be really dumb for the Federation to put the Omega device, make an Omega device. Like, what were they thinking? And letting the bad guys steal it. Yeah, it's obviously a trick. It's got to be a trick. It doesn't make any sense. It's this other Nustifer guy, unless he is a Q, in which case, okay, he's an overlord. Obviously, the Cavalry Rawl are the Devanani Rawl. That was the name of an alien that wanted Troy. The Rogue Rawl or whatever they are. Yeah, the bad guys. in the story. The main villains in this season are kind of screwy. But yeah, seeing Paul Giamatti chew scenery. Not in this episode, but two other ones. He'll be in the next one. So yeah, except for the silly stuff, the dialogue was okay. The corny music line made it sound like the Caleb character was going to go off himself, but he wasn't. The Klingon and the Bajoran lady hiding in the airlock was funny. There were some clever moments. The commander and the helms and the engineer lady and the doctor flying the ship and not activating the emergency command hologram. Ah, lore. They should have done that. Oh yeah, they didn't do that. Yeah, the doctor should go activate emergency command hologram. Yes, I'm the captain now. Maybe that's the trick. He activates the command hologram, and he goes with the people and the Starfleet to rescue them and stuff. And wouldn't she know, having received the signals? It's like their plan is a little screwy, but okay, fine. They're prisoner people. Doesn't make sense that the Federation lady Ake in the beginning would even abandon the mother and the kid on the planet, the prison planet. Doesn't make any sense. Why'd she do that? She's an idiot. So our commander is irredeemable when the story starts, and yeah, isn't quite redeemable in this one, but could be redeemed. It's not just me, but that prison lady is basically reminds me of the Seska Cito character Dekalala thing going. That's very similar to that. So clearly they're aware of our stuff, and they're like, okay, the mother is sort of, kind of, in a way, the whole Locarno secret story arc thing going on. In the future, writ large, several generations later. Of course, from Robert Picardo's perspective, that happened yesterday. Because it's, to all the cast and everything, it's 2026. Or when they filmed this last year. 2025. Yeah, it was already done and put together 6-8 months ago. So yeah, but no, we're not shills for Paramount, not at all. But I can tell you about stuff and reviews and things. And the 47 is the dorm room number. That's all it is. It's nice that they reference it though. We think you get some dramatic thing. Now had it been written a little later than 8 months ago, it would have been called the 6-7 Minds. But no, it's 47. Which is coincidentally, the age of Patrick Stewart in season 1 of Next Generation. He was playing somebody 57, but he was 47. Or almost 60. He was playing somebody. Yeah, he's 67. He was playing 6-7. He was Picard. The character was born in 2305. So by 2405, he would have been 100 years old. So he was not quite 100 in the Picard show. As he dies and he gets reborn as a robot, just shy of 96 or 97. And then got rebuilt as a robot. Does beg the question though, and I'm not sure, but maybe the mother is actually secretly not her, but they're reacting in a way that looks like it is her. But there's obviously red herrings going on in this, and mystery and horror fan. Yeah, you never separate the crew and a horror movie. It's kind of a horror episode, kind of. Well, space. I would say adventure episode, thriller. No, there's nothing directly scary. It was some thriller. Oh, and it seemed like that Sam girl wanted to bang the Caleb dude. As a robot. Clang. You know what else doesn't make any sense? Trek Yards was pointing out, okay, the holo emitter and all that, they're aliens. And they're suddenly nice, they're not as evil when they're actually like talking. But the hologram people, that doesn't make sense. Yeah, they're not V'ger, because that wouldn't make sense. It would make sense that they would create a person. But yeah, the idea that's that okay, that works. Yeah, and not program her to. Yeah, where was it going with that? I think what I was getting at is they send her to a place that she's not familiar with and don't program her enough to be able to function there, and get injured and stuff. Yeah, that's kind of what I was getting at. Yeah, they're not smart enough to do that, but they're smart enough to make an actual synthetic life form, like with human emotions and stuff. But they didn't figure that other stuff out. That's weird. So can he do her? Oh yeah, I figured out what it is. If her, I think I mentioned this last time. If her master display can easily be accessed by anyone touching the device and going into it, that's a bad program. Because yeah, it's the same principle. In that, in some of the later Star Treks, for fun, they would put a Master Systems display, an MSD, and a HUD on the bridge behind the captain, showing all the ship systems and the ship and what it looks like. That's a bad idea. If you're in a space battle, you don't want one of those things right behind you where the bad guys can go, oh, HD camera, zoom in on that. Oh, I see. That's that's their vulnerable spots on the scanner. Okay, that was stupid. Yes, that was very stupid. They knew where to hit us because they scanned it. They did address that in Generations, with Geordi getting scanned. Yeah, and they cut a scene out that made that scene make more sense. They should have included it, in which he's torturing him. That was not included in the for Generations. Yeah, they should have explained how he did that. Yeah. Menaced him and sent him back. And then they didn't have a scan of him or anything. Yeah, that's the problem with also the Space Menace, the galaxy. It's a galaxy. You can't do that. It just doesn't. No, it's just stupid. It's three-dimensional for one thing. So if you had, there's always an opening somewhere. They have a transwarp core. Maybe they could use that. They probably should. They have a transwarp core. Just go through that. It's going to go through. Yeah, that's a spatial anomaly. Yeah, Arcay's kind of, not because she's part Cillian and the other part Lathian. She doesn't know, like, not to do dumb things that don't make sense. But yeah, it was like when the other episodes about this future Federation would have like less than 24 people on the station. This one's kind of doing that too, but they had more extras. Yeah, and it's like, how are they taking over anything? There's only like 100 of them, maybe. It's like, but yes, they'll probably pull some kind of what a twist thing. Should be a shapeshifter or something. That'd be kind of stupid. Yeah. Hey, it'd be funny if she turned into Mustafa and he was a changeling. They're not going to do this, but if they did, I'd be like, okay, ew, well, no, they're not going to do that. Oh, yeah. But in Star Trek Picard Season 3, that evil Romulan lady was meant to be Sela, and it was meant to be Denise Crosby, but she didn't want to do it. And she was like, I didn't want to do that character, like, make her evil and have her be, like, a changeling, like, doctor lady. That makes sense. So, yeah, so Amanda Plummer got the part. Also, in that other scene when they're in the artifact in the end of Discovery, that was meant to be Nichelle Nichols that shows up at the end. Like, it just happened to be her playing the ancient person. They got somebody that looked a little like her. They went to get her, but she was ailing and she's dying, so they couldn't cast her in the story. But I did in mine because I have action figures of that character. So I'm like, the action figure. The other one, the ancestor, descendant of Wilson. It was actually Wilson or her. It was actually her niece that goes in the artifact. But then they rescue her at the end of Legacy. Yeah, I didn't make a proper after show. Well, I did make an after show for my stuff, but I didn't do it right, and I rambled on about Martial Sportist stuff, like Johnny Swan stuff, COL stuff, and like for a good hour, and it wasn't about that. There were like two or three episodes about those guys, Seawell, and that was it. And why was I rambling on about that? And then other goofy stuff that didn't make sense to ramble on about. Yeah, so this episode is the penultimate episode, dealing with a lot of silly, goofy things. But I've still stuck with it all the way to the end. So I'm still going to stick with it all the way to the end. It's not as bad as season 2 of Discovery, where they were like, ooh, yeah, it's not and that's for the burn episode of Discovery season 3. Not nearly off there too. Actually, I've learned some other stuff about that too. Originally, that whole 1,000 years in the future book thing, written by the guy who wrote the last season of Discovery, Leslie's last episode. That book thing was not supposed to be 1,000 years after 3189. It was supposed to be 3189. They just did the math wrong. Originally, there was original footage and dialogue and stuff saying that they were going to introduce Craft and Craft's transforming ship. The Discovery was supposed to be, when it went to the future, abandoned for 1,000 years and discovered there. But they screwed up the math, and they're like, it isn't really 1,000 years. It's only about 700, 800 years. And 900. Well, not really 1,000, 900 years. And that other ship was supposed to be Book ship. They were supposed to find the Discovery, bring the Discovery to the crew, which had been transported by space-time by the array to the other thing. The alien transported the crew to a planet. And the captain was going to meet them on the planet. And it wasn't going to be a year later. It was going to be they're going to meet them on the planet and rescue the crew, go back to the ship, and take the ship back. That was going to be Craft ship, not Book ship. But then they changed his name to Book or Booker. And they changed it because they didn't want to connect it to the episode. And then later on, they hired the guy that did the episode. So that's relevant to Discovery. And not relevant to this episode necessarily, although they mentioned the programmable matter. The first guy to use the programmable matter was Cal with a K, who showed them the programmable matter. And of course, Calicat is, of course, a stage name. Adam Brown, but stage name. But yes, for this character, California Cat with K's. And including that in there, they're well aware of our stuff. Well aware. Go up north, season 2. So. No, probably not. They're not going to hire me. Maybe. Hollywood. To and who you share a blow with, and the other blow. And I don't. I really don't. Don't do that. But yeah, it was fine. It was a little weird and silly in parts, but it was fine. Fine episode. So